As we've seen in this series on Constantine the Great, he was overall a pivotal figure in the late antique world, the period that bridges classical antiquity and the emerging Byzantine era. We saw how Constantine rose to power by defying the tetrarchic system installed by Diocletian, becoming sole emperor in 342 AD after defeating his rivals, and then completing a move that was long overdue, establishing a new eastern capital in the Roman Empire, recognizing the reality that the West was slowly dying while the East remained vibrant and viable. Today we look at the end of Constantine's life as he entered his 6th decade, and there remained many problems to be solved. Looming wars in both the West and the East, the question of who would succeed him and what kind of system would be in place to ensure stability. We're going to talk about all of these things on this episode of the Pax Romana podcast. Episode 88, The Death of Constantine. Hi everyone, it's good to be back in the saddle. I've had a few disruptions as I've traveled and also had surgery on my knee, and now the academic year has begun. I will probably upload new podcasts over the next few months at one every 2 weeks. That should give new listeners plenty of time to go back and listen to the back catalog, and will give me time to work on my next new project, which I'm excited to announce right now. I've signed a contract with Princeton University Press to write the biography of the Roman Emperor Commodus. It's amazing to think about that with all the attention paid to Marcus Aurelius, very little has been said about Commodus. The biography is going to cover Commodus's entire life, looking at a man who was the chosen son of Marcus and Faustina, well-educated, trained by a great emperor and his advisors, but who was thrust into power a little too early and simply did not have the character traits to be a good emperor. His story is much like that of Macbeth or even Anakin Skywalker, a triumph to tragedy. And I think Commodus' story offers plenty of lessons as to how tyrants are often made rather than simply born. I'll have more to say about my plans for that book, but I expect to be furiously researching and writing over the next few months. And as a result, you'll get a new podcast episode about once every couple of weeks. I've got some other things in the hopper as well. I can't announce those just yet, but I'll be sure to keep you up to date over the next few months. Anyway, let's go ahead and get to today's episode. Constantine, as we saw previously, secured his position as sole ruler of the Roman Empire in 324 AD, decisively defeating the Eastern Emperor Licinius and embarking on a transformative phase. Constantine established the new city of Constantinople, making it his imperial residence, dedicating the city in 330, marking a symbolic shift from the slowly decaying Western Roman Empire and city of Rome to the vibrant new Eastern capital of Constantinople, which was infused with Constantine's own new Christian identity. And this was a move which reflected Constantine's evolving vision for a Christian empire led by a Christian emperor. We saw also that Constantine restructured Rome's bureaucratic system, creating a more centralized administration. He introduced new financial and monetary reforms, including the new gold solidus, a stable and enduring coin that became a cornerstone of economic stability over the next few centuries. One of the items I didn't speak about in earlier episodes because I wanted to save it till the discussion of Constantine's dynasty is what happened in 326 with Constantine's eldest son, a man named Crispus. Crispus was not the son of Constantine's wife, Fausta. He was, in fact, born to a woman named Minervina that Constantine spent a lot of time with earlier in his life and had since discarded. Crispus was favored by Constantine, even though he was not the son of Constantine's current wife. He served as consul. He was used in Constantine's military campaigns. But strangely, in 326, Constantine ordered his son, Crispus, executed. And we don't exactly know why. Curiously, the contemporary sources written during Constantine's life don't say much at all about what happened to the firstborn son of the reigning emperor. That's weird. Instead, we have to go to the historian Zosimus, who wrote nearly 200 years later. We don't know where Zosimus got his information, but this is what he says about what happened in 326. Quote, "With the entire empire now under his control, Constantine revealed his true character, acting without restraint. In Rome, filled with pride, he committed grave acts. He executed his son, Crispus, previously named Caesar, on suspicion of an affair with his own stepmother, Fausta, ignoring family bonds. When his mother Helena grieved deeply for Crispus, Constantine, pretending to console her, locked Fausta in an overheated bath where she died." That's Zosimus's New History, Book 2. This would be a scandal if true. What Zosimus claims is Constantine found out that his eldest son was sleeping with Crispus's stepmother, Constantine's current wife, and that Constantine not only murdered Crispus, but went ahead and murdered Fausta, his wife, as well at the exact same time. What's true about this account? We do know that Crispus died suddenly at this time, as did Fausta. There is virtually no mention of what happened in contemporary sources, which is odd, arguably even scandalous. And then we have Zosimus speaking authoritatively 200 years later, but without giving us his exact source. Some historians think that Zosimus is speaking the truth. Others suspect that maybe there was some kind of plot, that Crispus sought to take over for his father, maybe a little bit early. It could also be the case that Fausta did not want this son of another woman wrecking the succession plans of her own sons by Constantine, and therefore invented some kind of scandal, and then later either died of natural causes or Constantine had her executed for some other reason. We do know that the later Roman emperor, Julian, who was a member of Constantine's family, wrote a speech in praise of Constantine's wife, saying that she was a moral person and a virtuous woman. But even if we don't know the details of what happened in 326, it does show that there were tensions in Constantine's immediate family. That same year, by the way, Licinius's son, Licinius, if you'll remember, was the emperor that Constantine defeated to take over sole command of the empire. Well, he too was executed that same year. So maybe there was just some kind of purge. Maybe Constantine himself was behind some or maybe all of these killings. We just don't know. But in addition to conflict within Constantine's own family, was conflict around the greater Roman Empire. Constantine's later years were marked by vigorous military efforts to secure Roman borders and maybe even expand them. In 332 AD, Constantine forged an alliance with a group called the Sarmatians, a peoples who lived in parts of what is now Ukraine and southern Russia. The reason Constantine allied with them is because he was more worried about a group called the Goths, who were pushing on Roman borders in Eastern Europe. In exchange for the Sarmatians fighting on Constantine's behalf, he allowed them to settle some of their farmers and soldiers along the Danube River, hoping that that would bolster frontier defenses and ultimately bring new people into Roman society. But as often happened during this time, Rome's allies became enemies, and within 2 years, Constantine was fighting the Sarmatians, attempting to regain control of the territory near the Danube. By 336, Constantine was not only successful in retaking that land, he actually pushed into the former Roman province of Dacia, and he got credit for a reconquest of Dacia and took the title Daciacus Maximus, in other words, greatest conqueror of Dacia. It had been about 50 years since the Romans had ruled Dacia, and Constantine took that territory, built a bridge over the Danube, not unlike Trajan, and could now lay claim to not only ruling a unified empire, but also expanding it. But this was really the last major campaign that Constantine saw through to its end. By 337 AD, Constantine's health was in decline. He had hoped to launch a grand Persian crusade, really, is what we might call it, to aid Christians who lived in Persia under the Sassanid king Shapur II, who was evidently persecuting them, at least according to Constantine. The idea here was a true religious war, where Christian bishops would accompany the army, and Constantine would move through Persian territory in a church-shaped tent. Constantine hoped to be baptized in the Jordan River along the way. However, Constantine would not live through the end of the year, and he had to settle for different plans for his baptism. Yeah, that's right. Constantine had not been baptized. This Christian emperor who had done so much to signal a new imperial religion had not actually been baptized. But I think this is consistent if we think about what we have learned about Constantine's views of religion generally. Constantine still appeared to think like a Roman, even about Christianity. That is, religion was contractual. One did things for gods so that gods would do things for them. Or if the gods did things for you, then you did things for them to earn their favor and preserve their protection. So for Constantine, baptism was not exactly the same as it's described in, say, the New Testament. For Constantine, baptism was a ritual that actually forgave sins at the end of one's life. And so it was important to delay baptism as long as possible so that one could get all one's sins forgiven. So it wasn't until Constantine was laying in bed dying that he was finally baptized by one Eusebius of Nicomedia. Interestingly, this Eusebius was an Arian, a member of the heretical group of Christians that Constantine had himself ordered purged from the church. Irony of ironies. But for Constantine, the ritual of baptism was evidently more important than the doctrinal beliefs of the person who performed that baptism. And then finally, in May of 337, at age 65, near Nicomedia, Constantine finally died. His body was embalmed and transported to Constantinople, where his son, Constantius II, oversaw funeral arrangements in the Church of the Holy Apostles. Constantine had a porphyry sarcophagus built. This was a beautiful purple stone, and the sarcophagus was placed among the relics associated with Christ's apostles. Constantine evidently thought of himself as a kind of 13th apostle. Now, although Constantius II was the only son present for the funeral, there were in fact many people who claimed to be Constantine's heir when Constantine died, and they were scattered in different parts of the Roman Empire. If you'll remember, the original idea during this century was to have a tetrarchic system, a merit-based system, where there were two senior emperors ruling and then two junior emperors waiting in the wings, also ruling at the same time. And then when the senior emperors were finished, either because they died or in the case of Diocletian and his co-emperor, they abdicated, then the Caesars would take over, they would appoint new junior emperors, and then the system would repeat itself over the course of time, never leading to civil war, but always preserving the rule of multiple emperors. Constantine, when he died, however, favored his own family members. Everyone placed in power at the death of Constantine were related to Constantine in some way. At the core of the succession were Constantine's 3 surviving sons, all children of Constantine's now late wife, Fausta. They had all been elevated to Caesars with regional responsibilities prior to Constantine's death. These 3 men were as follows. First, Constantine II, who was the oldest son. He was about 21 years old when Constantine died, and he had been Caesar since March 1st, 317. Yeah, that's right. If you're doing the math, that means he became a Caesar when he was but a child. Constantine II was given the western third or so of the Roman Empire, ruling from the capital of Trier, overseeing Gaul, Britain, and Spain, the territory that had been loyal to Constantine when he first rose to power. Clearly, this region would have to be defended as it was under assault from Germanic tribes crossing over the Rhine. The second surviving son of Constantine was Constantius II, who we already met. He was about a year younger than his older brother, 20 years old. He had become Caesar on November 8th, 324, when he was 7, and was assigned the easternmost provinces of the Roman Empire. His capital was Antioch in Syria. He was given the lucrative province of Egypt, as well as parts of Asia Minor. He too would have a fight on his hands, dealing with the Persian frontier, preparing for threats from the Sassanid king Shapur II, and maybe even needing to carry out Constantine's planned war in the east. The youngest son was Constans, and he was still a teenager, had been only recently made Caesar on Christmas Day of 333, and he was given the intermediary spot between his 2 older brothers, governing Italy, Africa, and Illyricum, which encompasses parts of modern Croatia. Obviously, this included the city of Rome as well. Constans was the most inexperienced of the 3 brothers, and perhaps the idea here was to give him some protection from the conflicts that were brewing in the east and the west, although at the same time, his territory at least partly included the Danubian frontier, which was not exactly a peaceful border. In addition to these 3 sons, Constantine also elevated 2 of his nephews. One of these men, Dalmatius, was the son of Constantine's half-brother, and he had already been inserted into the succession plans in 335, having been given the provinces of Thrace, Macedonia, as well as parts of Greece. The idea here was for Dalmatius, along with the youngest son Constans, to secure the Balkan zone where the Goths and the Sarmatians were threatening Roman interests. And then finally, the 5th heir was Dalmatius's brother, Hannibalianus, who was not made a Caesar, but was actually made king of Armenia and Pontus. This was unique in the Roman Empire. Even the most autocratic Roman emperors did not call themselves or their heirs kings. But historians think that Hannibalianus was made king because it was he that was perhaps going to take over Persia once Constantius II finished his father's campaign against the Sassanids. The Sassanids, of course, were not going to accept a Roman governor, but they might accept a Roman king. So you can see in all of this a combination of family loyalty. Clearly, all of these people are directly related to Constantine, but there is also a sense of strategy here. The assignments were not made at random. There is, as was the case with the Tetrarchy, a kind of regional zoning where multiple successors are in charge of particular regions of the empire, and the idea is that they are to work together, that there is a unity among them. This is not a formal division of the Roman Empire into different empires or nations. It's supposed to still be one Roman Empire ruled by many emperors, all working together. However, as rational as these plans were, they did not end up working out the way that Constantine probably hoped. In fact, they didn't last the year. What followed after the death of Constantine, some call the Great Massacre of 337. Others, like Eusebius, just called it the unfortunate events. Either way, as you might guess, there's going to be some killing within Constantine's family. What happened to Constantine's heirs? Who killed who? And who survived? And what effect did this have on the Roman Empire following the death of Constantine? We will talk about Constantine's successors on the next episode of the Pax Romana podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Pax Romana podcast. For more information, including a list of primary sources and further reading, check the show notes. Music by Red Productions and Exocor. Follow Professor Colin Elliott on X at ProfCPE or email colin@paxromanapodcast.com. Listen to more episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or just about anywhere podcasts are available. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Pax Romana podcast.